Hey guys, it's Nick from Thermaltake Australia. I'm the resident PC builder here, and today I will be going through some tips and tricks on how to cable manage your system. So let's get to it. To start with, let's go through some of the tools that you'll need. Now you're gonna need something to cut with, preferably a pair of flush cutters like this if you have them. If not, pliers with any sharp blade will do. And also you're gonna need some zip ties, multiple sizes if you can find them. If not, just go for like the fattest ones that you can find, because sometimes you just need them. So usually where I like to start with my cables is anything related to the front I/O, so your power cables, audio cable, and USB. So what I'm currently doing is just kind of grabbing all the cables and plugging them into where they need to go, but you need to have them kind of follow a path as to where they'll eventually end up. So I know that the HD audio is on the bottom left-hand side of the board, so that's where I want this cable to run to, just to the little cutout above it. So when I eventually zip tie this down, it's going to be running something along like this. So we'll just go through with all the cables like that, and then see how we end up. I just find it easier to get all the kind of small loose cables out of the way with at the beginning, and that lets me tackle the large power supply cables without everything kind of getting jumbled up in the process. So this part is after all the components have been installed. So after your motherboard, graphics card, radiator, power supply, all that sort of stuff. Consult your manual to make sure that you're plugging them into the right pins, because you'll be very surprised how many people actually plug these in incorrectly. And while the motherboard is labeled, it is in the absolute tiniest writing that basically no one can read. Also, if you're finding it really tricky to plug them in, you can do them before you put the graphics card in, and then that will free up a lot of room for your fingers. So we've plugged in all of our front I/O cables, but as you can see, they're still a bit messy. So what I like to then do is tie them down to the case on our little cable tie down points. And then that'll just get them all out of the way for when we have to start tackling our power supply cables. Not so much a method as much as just trying to keep everything like neat and tidy. So if you have a look, I try to kind of keep everything in the same order, running down and through the zip ties. I don't really like when cables start crossing over each other. It leads to kind of large bundles and just makes everything look kind of untidy. All right. Next, I like to cut off all of our excess little zip ties kind of as we go along. First reason is because they're annoying and they're in the way. And the second, if you've never copped one of these to the eye, they really freaking hurt. So kind of want to get that out of the way with. And then we'll tackle any of our fan cables that need to get plugged into any splitters or extensions that we might have. And again, just kind of zip tie that down somewhere in the case where you can keep them nice and taut and, well, managed, I guess. Really long cables like these, you can tackle them a couple ways. You can fold them in over themselves, kind of like this, and then just do it in a bundle. Or what you can do is eventually I'm going to be having a CPU 8-pin cable run down the side here, and then you can actually just run this along with it as well, if you want to do it that way, which is how I'll be doing it. So, power supply cables. I like to start with the 8-pin CPU because it's the furthest away, and then I can just get it completely out of the way with. Same sort of thing, I know that it's going to be on the top left-hand side of the board. So I will plug it in, and then zip tie down along with all of my excess fan cables that I have. If you have trouble getting the zip ties through these like little cable hooks, what you can do is just put a tiny little bend in the tip of the zip tie, and then I'll let you feed it through so you can get a good grip on it and then pull it through the rest of the way. And that is the 8-pin CPU cable all done. You notice that it kind of does this little cross thing here. If your power supply is flipped the other way, so in our current orientation, the fan is up, so the CPU cable is actually on the further side of the power supply. If it was flipped the other way, this 8-pin cable would actually be a lot longer, and it would just run nicely right down here without having to do this crossover. Next, I like to do the graphics card cables. So at the same time as the graphics card cable, we'll also do the 24-pin cable because it has to go through the same cutout anyway. And then we can zip tie them both together. So the exact same thing as we've done before, we've got our cables plugged in. So now it is just time to zip tie them to the case. Now we already have our front I/O running the same place that these cables are going to run. So if you can't get to a cable tie down point, what you can do is just zip tie them to the already tied down cables. And that'll keep it all in place. Again, you kind of want your cables to lay flat while doing this. So if you have to like twist and turn your cables in order to have that happen, don't be afraid to do so. Just like that. So all we have left are SATA drives and Molex if you have them. Now we don't have a hard drive installed in here, but what I would usually do is plug the SATA drive or the SATA cable in, sorry, and then all the excess just kind of shove under the power supply shroud. So I grab all the excess cables, zip tie them onto themselves, and just shove them under. And that is a pretty good cable managed system. All right, so here's our finished system, and here's a quick before and after of what it looks like. So for any first-time cable managers out there, I would sort of, if you're building a smaller system actually, so something like a mini ITX or even a micro ATX, cable manage as you go. So I would actually plug in all of your front I/O cables before you install a graphics card. Otherwise you're gonna have a really hard time trying to plug them into the bottom of your motherboard with your graphics card in the way. I would also kind of envision where you want your cables to go. So we knew that, for example, these fan cables and this CPU cable could run the same way. So then we zip tied them together. Same with our graphics card cable and our 24-pin cable. So kind of cable manage in groups if you can. And also don't be afraid to use zip ties. You can even just use them to temporarily hold cables down if you need to, and then cut them at a later time to then manage it with everything else if you need to. Apart from that, really just take your time, don't stress about it. And if it doesn't turn out in the end, know that you'll just be putting a solid side panel on anyway, and no one's ever gonna see what's behind there. So thank you for coming to my short little tutorial. Like the video if you liked it, like it if you disliked it. I hope that you learnt something, even if it was just a few little tips and tricks. Don't forget to subscribe and watch any of our other videos, and I will see you next time.